I knew something was wrong the moment I opened my front door and smelled that sharp scent of certified mail. You know the smell. Ink, glue, and bad news. But I never expected what I was about to read. A $30,000 fine for a cabin the HOA claimed was illegal. A cabin that wasn't even on their land. That was the moment my quiet life turned into the biggest fight I ever stepped into. My name is Garrett Steele, and 2 years ago I thought my biggest worry would be choosing between oak or cedar for my workshop cabinets. I was 52, retired from 30 years as an electrician, and planning to spend the rest of my days breathing clean mountain air. But when my wife Melody passed from cancer, everything inside our house in Pine Ridge Estate started feeling tight. The beige walls, the quiet streets, the neighbors who whispered sympathy like it was a chore. I couldn't stand being in that house alone. That's when I remembered the 40-acre plot my Uncle Ray left me out in the Colorado foothills. Wild land. Real land. Not the kind where HOAs tell you how many inches your grass can grow. I drove out there one cold morning, wind smelling like frost and pine sap, and stood on soil that felt honest. The land was about 300 yards past the last HOA street sign. I could see the pavement end and the dirt road begin. I swear I heard the air change the moment I crossed it. The place felt right. So I decided to build a small cabin. Nothing fancy, just a place where a man could drink coffee without someone checking his mailbox color. I went to the county office, walked past the old clerk who smelled like dusty paper and peppermint mints, and pulled every permit they offered. Structural, electrical, septic, everything. I even taped the yellow placard to a pine tree like a badge of honor. I built the cabin with my own hands. Cedar siding so fresh it smelled sweet in the sun. The floor creaked the way good wood should. You could hear the wind travel through the needles outside like waves rolling across a beach. That place became my therapy. My reset button. Then one morning I heard tires crunching on gravel. Not truck tires, fancier, expensive. When I stepped outside, there she was, Vivian Hartwell, president of our HOA. She walked toward me in designer heels, sinking into soft dirt, holding a clipboard like it was a sword. 58 years old, hair sprayed so stiff it didn't move in the breeze, and eyes that scanned everything like she was inspecting a crime scene. "Mr. Steele?" she said in this cold, sweet tone that made my skin crawl. "I hope you've cleared this construction with the proper authorities." I pointed to the bright yellow permits. "All done with the county, ma'am." Her smile twitched. Just a flicker, but enough for me to see the storm behind it. "Well, county permits are one thing. HOA approval is another." I almost laughed. "Ma'am, HOA boundaries end at the street signs." She didn't like that answer. 2 weeks later, I got the certified letter. That sharp ink smell hit me before I tore it open. Inside was a fine for $30,000 for unauthorized construction. I read the notice twice, the words blurring with anger. They claimed my cabin fell under HOA jurisdiction. They claimed I violated landscaping rules. They claimed I ignored community standards. But the cabin was 847 feet outside their map, on land that existed long before Pine Ridge Estates ever showed up. I called Vivian. I tried to be polite. "Mrs. Hartwell, I think there's been a mistake." Her voice came through the phone, smooth as glass and twice as cold. "There's no mistake, Mr. Steele. Our covenants apply to all member properties, regardless of location. My land isn't in the HOA. We disagree. The fine stands. Good day." And then she hung up. For the first time in a long time, I felt my blood burn hot. The kind of heat that climbs up your back and makes your hands shake. But bullies count on people staying quiet. She counted wrong. Within a week, she launched what I can only describe as neighborhood warfare. Code enforcement officers kept stopping by, randomly. Neighbors watched me over hedges like nosy owls with cell phones. At the grocery store, I heard someone whisper, "The poor man isn't thinking straight since his wife died." Vivian was painting me as unstable, dangerous, a problem. The last straw came when she showed up at my house, standing on my porch with that tight smile and a stack of paperwork. "Garrett," she said like we were friends, "if you remove the cabin immediately, we can reduce your fine to $5,000. $5,000 for something she had no authority over. That was the moment something clicked in me, like a wire finally finding the socket. "Mrs. Hartwell," I said, "I think it's time I did some research of my own." She didn't like the sound of that. The next morning, I drove to the county courthouse with a thermos of black coffee and a determination I hadn't felt since the day I buried Melody. The basement smelled like old files and cold concrete. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. But the truth was down there, waiting. What I found changed everything. And it was only the beginning. I didn't know it yet, but walking into that courthouse basement was the moment this whole fight turned from a neighborhood dispute into something a whole lot bigger. The place smelled like old paper and floor cleaner, the kind that sticks to your clothes. A lone ceiling fan clicked with every slow rotation, and the fluorescent lights buzzed above me like they were tired of working overtime. But nothing down there lied. Not the maps, not the deeds, not the county records. I spread the documents across a long wooden table, my coffee steaming beside them. The first thing I pulled was the original Pine Ridge Estates Incorporation map, thick lines showing their boundaries. Stamped, dated, filed. And clear as daylight, their jurisdiction ended at Granite Ridge Road. My cabin sat almost 900 feet beyond that. I felt my chest tighten. Not from anger, from validation. From the clean hit of truth. Then I found something even bigger. Uncle Ray's 40-acre deed, dated 15 years before the HOA existed, grandfathered, untouchable, protected by Colorado law in black ink that smelled like the 70s. I ran a hand over the paper. It felt rough, older, real, kind of like Uncle Ray himself. But the real knockout punch came from a section buried deep in the HOA's own covenants. Section 12, subsection C, Clause 4. It said the HOA's authority only applied to properties within their recorded boundaries, as filed on March 15, 2008. That was it. That was the golden key. My cabin sat nowhere near their recorded map. Legally, the HOA had as much authority over my land as they did over the moon. Still, I wanted proof the HOA couldn't twist. That's when the clerk recommended a surveyor named Rex Morrison. Old school guy, face weathered like he'd argued with the sun for decades. Always wore a dented baseball cap and carried a laser measuring tool like it was a piece of his soul. He took one look at Vivian's fine letter and snorted. "Son, I've seen HOA presidents who think they run the whole county, but GPS don't lie." Quote. By noon, he had his tripod and scope set up in the forest, cold morning air wrapping around us, pine needles crunching under our boots. You could hear distant birds, the soft breeze, and the mechanical whir of his equipment scanning satellite points. After 3 hours, he wiped his hands on his jeans and said, 847 feet outside their border. That's your number. I sent certified copies of the survey to every HOA board member, along with a polite request to withdraw the fine and issue a written apology. Vivian's reply came fast. Surveyor error, fine stands, pay immediately to avoid a property lien. A lien, on my house, over a cabin she had zero authority over. That hit different. That was an attack on the home I built with Melody, the place where her voice still lived in the walls. Vivian wasn't just annoying at that point. She was dangerous. 2 days later, a black sedan rolled into my driveway. A fancy one. Chrome shining like someone polished it that morning. Out stepped a lawyer in a suit so sharp he could slice wind. Richard Blackwell, of Blackwell, Morrison & Associates. I'd seen their ads on Highway 6. Protecting your community, they said. More like draining it. He shook my hand like he was awarding me a trophy. Mr. Steele, we're here to resolve your violations. Behind him, Vivian stepped out dressed in a navy pantsuit and that fake smile she used like armor. Her perfume hit me before her voice did, a sharp floral punch that clung to the cold air. Blackwell handed me a stack of papers. Cease and desist. 23 pages of legal words that felt like a boot on my neck. Then, while Blackwell talked, Vivian started wandering my yard with her measuring tape like a predator sniffing for weakness. I watched her through the window as she measured my fence, photographed my mailbox, and even counted the rocks in my flower bed. It was the same creeping feeling you get when you realize someone's been staring at you longer than they should. The next morning, I got a fresh set of certified letters. My mailbox was apparently 2 inches too close to the sidewalk. My fence stain was too weathered. My truck was suddenly labeled a commercial vehicle. Every violation came with a fine. $500, $750, $1,200. It was a financial ambush. I sat at my kitchen table, letters spread out like a deck of cursed cards, coffee turning cold in my hands. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. But then I remembered something my old union steward used to say. When management comes after you with lawyers, they're hiding something. And my gut told me Vivian was hiding a lot. So I went back to the courthouse. But this time I wasn't looking for property lines. I was looking for money. HOA money. Because bullies don't usually go nuclear unless they're protecting something much bigger than a cabin. What I found made my skin crawl. The HOA collected around $180,000 a year in dues, but they spent $45,000 on legal fees. For a quiet neighborhood where the biggest complaint was someone putting up Christmas lights too early, it made no sense. Then I saw it. The vendor list. Payments to Blackwell's firm, month after month, thousands at a time. And then there was something worse. Payments to a company called Pine Ridge Property Management, LLC, a company with Vivian's home address. That's when everything clicked so hard it felt like the floor shifted under me. Vivian wasn't just abusing her power, she was stealing. And she was using my cabin to cover the holes she created. The fight wasn't about rules, it was about money. And now I knew it. The night everything finally snapped into place, Josephine's living room smelled like warm coffee and old carpet, and the air felt thick with the kind of determination you only see when regular people hit their breaking point. 23 homeowners crowded into that small space. Some sat on the couch, some stood shoulder to shoulder, some leaned against the walls with crossed arms and tight jaws. You could feel it in the room. This wasn't fear anymore, it was resolve. Rex Morrison rolled out maps and survey forms on Josephine's dining table like a general laying out battle plans. Tom Bradley, our retired IRS auditor, arrived with a box of financial printouts so heavy he nearly threw out his back carrying it. Jennifer Walsh brought a binder full of every bogus violation notice the HOA had issued in the last 3 years. Even quiet neighbors, people I'd never heard speak above a whisper, showed up with folders, emails, and old letters. And at the head of the table, sitting in her late husband's favorite chair, was tiny, silver-haired Josephine. Her fingers rested on a thick folder labeled Harold's Records. She looked tired, but her eyes were steady, sharp, angry. That little folder would end up being the spark that blew the whole thing open. Ben Cross, our retired attorney, stood up and cleared his throat. "What you have here is enough to sink the Titanic." He held up one of Harold's bank statements. "This isn't mismanagement. This is systematic fraud." People murmured. Heads nodded. A few neighbors sat back in shock like they were finally letting themselves absorb the truth. For the first time, a community that had been bullied, fined, and intimidated for years was seeing the full picture. Vivian wasn't strict. She wasn't power-hungry. She wasn't even petty. She was a criminal. The more we dug, the worse it got. Fake maintenance contracts, overpriced vendor deals, legal fees inflated beyond reason, money disappearing into shell companies, companies tied back to Vivian's home address. And it wasn't just our neighborhood. 3 other communities showed the same patterns. We're looking at federal charges. Ben said, flipping another page. This could be racketeering. You could hear the room inhale at the same time. That was the moment we all realized the truth. Vivian wasn't running a neighborhood. She was running an empire. She just made the mistake of thinking nobody would notice. The next week was a blur of action. Complaints were filed with the district attorney, the Colorado Secretary of State, county regulators, and eventually the FBI's white-collar unit. Every file was airtight, every document cross-checked, every dollar accounted for. Then came the part we didn't expect. Vivian snapped. Not in a yelling way, not in a legal letter way, in a full meltdown way. First came flyers plastered across mailboxes claiming I was unstable and dangerous, professionally printed, dramatic fonts. She made me sound like a wild animal loose in the suburbs. Then came fake social media posts describing me as a threat to children, the kind of posts designed to destroy someone's reputation before the truth could catch up. When that didn't work, she tried something worse. One evening, the security camera on my cabin caught a shadowy figure creeping toward my generator with a crowbar. The woman was dressed in dark clothing, but the expensive hiking boots gave her away. Vivian thought destroying my power system would teach me a lesson. Instead, it handed the sheriff's office everything they needed for criminal charges. The next day, Deputy Martinez showed up at my door, his uniform flecked with dust and his expression grave. "Mr. Steele, you'll want to see this." He held up a printed screenshot of the footage. Vivian's face was caught in the reflection of my truck window. Clear as a confession. It wasn't just an HOA dispute anymore. It was a crime. Word spread fast. Neighbors who'd been afraid to speak suddenly found courage. They shared stories of threats, retaliation, bogus fines used as weapons. The fear that had once kept everyone quiet snapped like a stick underfoot. And when Vivian announced an emergency HOA meeting to vote on a $2,500 per household assessment for legal costs, people didn't just show up. They showed up angry. She tried to paint me as a liar, a troublemaker, a man unhinged by grief. She stood at the podium in the community center, clutching her notes, trying to talk over the whispers growing through the crowd. Then Jennifer raised her hand. "Mrs. Hartwell, if his complaints are lies, why were you caught on camera vandalizing his property?" Dead silence. Vivian froze. A crack ran through her perfect smile. Her fingers trembled on the edge of the podium. That's when Josephine stood up. She carried Harold's folder to the front like she was delivering a verdict. Bank statements, checks, receipts, all neatly paper-clipped. She spread them across the table one by one, her voice steady. "Harold found the discrepancies years ago. You stole from us, you hid it, and you threatened anyone who questioned you." Vivian's face went pale, then red, then something wild and panicked. She denied everything. Shouted about conspiracies. Claimed elder abuse. Accused neighbors of harassment. She even tried to order the media out of the room. But before she could reach the door, Deputy Martinez stepped forward with an arrest warrant. "Vivian Hartwell," he said, voice echoing through the stunned room, "you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and property destruction." The gasps, the whispers, the clicking of cameras. I'll never forget it. Vivian screamed all the way out. But the handcuffs stayed on. The rest happened fast. Federal investigators swarmed her office. Her shell companies collapsed in a single morning. Other corrupt board members flipped on her within hours. Her lawyer tried to spin it, but the evidence was a tidal wave. 6 months later, she was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. Our neighborhood got $247,000 back. The playground she stole money from was finally built. We named it the Harold Carter Memorial Playground. The cabin, still standing, still legal, still mine. Now I drink my coffee on that porch every morning, listening to the quiet sounds of pine needles rustling and kids laughing in the distance. The air smells clean, real, honest, like freedom, and when I look back at the whole fight, I know one thing for sure. Bullies only win when people stay silent, but when neighbors stand together, even the biggest HOA tyrant can fall.